Hello everyone, I'm Steven Johnson and I'm a developer advocate here at Prefect. I'm super excited to kick off our Moneyball Marvin series where we're going to use Major League Baseball data from last year's season to show off how you can use data processes inside of Prefect. Now don't worry if you don't work for a Major League Baseball team. I don't either. All these processes should be able to be ported over into your specific industry. We're just using Major League Baseball data because, it's fun. In part one of Moneyball Marvin, we're going to use Python to gather some season data from the Washington Nationals last season. So we're going to gather their roster, their schedule, and their box scores from every single one of their games except for the last one. We're going to save that for part two. Once that data is gathered, we're then going to use some more Python code to take that data and then upload it as a table inside of Snowflake. Once it's inside of Snowflake, we're going to use some SQL and dbt Cloud to transform that data to make it ready for part two. So if you want to be around for part two, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you'll know whenever that drops as well. If you want to follow along with us, you're going to need a few tools ready to go. So you're going to need Snowflake or some sort of cloud database involved. I'm going to use Snowflake in the video like I mentioned before. You're going to need Python installed with Prefect as well. And then you're going to need a dbt instance. So that could be dbt Core or dbt Cloud. So that's all the tools that we're going to use in this video. So without further ado, let's dive in and start writing some code. All right, so diving into the code here, I'm going to start off with importing some statements here. Some of these things we're going to use at the beginning, some we'll use later on. So I'm just going to go ahead and import all of them. So we're going to start by importing the stats API. So this is the MLB wrapper that is out on GitHub. I'll make sure I post a link to that in the description. So if you want to follow along, you'll be able to jump into that. It'll also be in the GitHub README. So we're going to need CSV because we're going to be working with some CSVs. If I could spell. So from datetime, import datetime. So we'll use some datetime later on. Import pandas. I feel like you almost always need pandas, but I could be wrong. So later on, we're going to take our data and put it inside of Snowflake as a table. So we need a few things for that. So we need to import the connect there, and then from connector .pandas tools, this is what allows us to write some pandas there. So we need that to work. Then we need two packages from Prefect. So from Prefect, we're going to import flow and task. So again, a task is just one part of our script. The flow is the whole script running together. We'll talk about that more in just a second. And then from Prefect .blocks.system. So this is going to be how we're going to protect our secrets in our code. So we're going to set those blocks inside of Prefect and then load them into the code. So import secret. All right, and then we're going to be good to rock there. All right, so we're going to start off with our first task. So that first task, so we just need to add a @task decorator. So all Prefect needs to just register that as a task. So our @task there, we're going to define a function of export roster to CSV. Okay, so some of this I'm going to code live with you and actually work through all this together. Some of it I'm just going to kind of copy paste a little bit and just talk through it just because I don't want to bore you too much. So export roster to CSV. So we're going to have team ID. We're going to hard code that right now to be 120. So 120 is the team ID of the Washington Nationals. Of course, you can grab any MLB team that you want. And then output directory is, we're just going to leave that at the current one there. Perfect. Okay, so let's start writing some code here. So we're just going to start off by getting our roster data. And that's just going to be a stats API call. So stats API.get. We're going to do team roster. And then we're going to specify the team ID. Well, if I can type today. I don't want to drop that down. There we go. Sorry, I'm getting back from my holiday break here. So team ID. And then colon team ID. So again, that's where we're going to specify just the Washington Nationals. Give you all the team rosters if you didn't specify, but we're going to specify the Washington Nationals rosters there. Perfect. So that's good to go. Let's close that parentheses up. So that's going to grab that data for us raw. So we're going to generate a file here. So we're going to do timestamp. So we can put a date on it if we want to. So we'll do timestamp datetime.now. Do a little bit of a cleanup here. Perfect. Toss that in there. And then file name is equal to, let's call it Nationals roster. .csv. So this is where you could put that timestamp in if you wanted to. I'm going to leave it out for right. I'm going to leave it now. I'm going to leave it out for mine. But if you wanted that timestamp in there, I want to build that into the code because that roster could obviously change throughout the season, right? So the roster from opening day is not going to be the roster of the last day of the season. So a timestamp is good in there to keep a historical record. If you wanted to store it in S3 or something like that to make sure you have a historical backlog of what's going on there. We're going to leave it out for right now, though. Okay, so we're going to define some field names here. So this is what we want to pull out of this data. So we're going to have jersey number. We're going to have position. We're going to have the status. So that's the status of the team. Full name, or status of the player on the team, excuse me. And then last, but certainly not least, we're going to need their ID. That's obviously going to be really important for us to connect into other parts of the data, like the box score later on. So we've got our field names there. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to write this thing to a CSV file. So we're going to have with open. So we're going to, with open, the file name that we specified above. We're going to have that as a write. And then we'll do new line is equal to just a blank. And then we're going to call it as CSV file. Okay, so we're going to write this as, so we're going to do a writer is equal to CSV dot dictionary writer. We'll do a CSV file. And then we're going to specify our field names as the field names. That's why we specified that a second ago. So it's going to write that for us. We're going to write our header. So writer dot write header. Perfect there. That's good. Okay, so now we have our file actually specified as the format that we want. So now we need to write that data into that file. So for player in roster data roster, we're going to do row is equal to open up a dictionary here. So we're going to do jersey number. Specify that as player. Jersey number. So again, we're going to just go down through there and do this for basically the rest of this. So position, and then that's going to be player position, and then we're going to specify we want the abbreviation for it as well. Abbreviation, perfect. Probably need a comma there. There we go. So we're going to have status as the player. Status. We want the description of that status. Okay, perfect. If I had $1 for every time I've forgotten a comma, I'd be a rich man. All right, so full name. Specify the player, the person, and then full name. And then last but not least, we need to specify that ID. Do player, person, and then the ID. So you can probably assume based on what I've written here that there's a lot more data that you can get from this API. And there is a lot more data. I've pulled out what I thought was important for what we're going to talk about here without just getting too far into the weeds. If you love baseball and want to really play with this data, grab that API, like I mentioned before, from the GitHub, and just go crazy with it. And make sure you send us what you build, because I'd be excited to see what you build out with it as well. Okay, so that's going to write that file for us. So let's get out of this, back up here, and then we're going to return the file name and the roster data. Perfect. Okay, so that is the task that we're going to need to get that file out with the roster data. Okay, so that's going to grab our roster for us. Okay, so the next task that we're going to specify is we're going to do the exact same thing, but we're going to do the schedule this time. So I'm not going to painstakingly make you watch me write all this. I'm going to copy and paste it in, and we'll talk about the kind of the differences between the two pieces of code. A lot of it is just that we're talking about the schedule versus actual player data. But the rest of the code, like style-wise, is pretty much exactly the same with the exception of just the nuance of the schedule. Again, I'll run through this one quickly. So we're going to grab our schedule data. So we're going to input our team ID 120 again. We have a start date and end date. The reason I put that in there is because, again, we want all the games and all the box scores except for the last game. Season's already happened. We're going to act like that last game hasn't been played yet just for the sake of this project. So that's what it's going to do there. So it's going to grab that schedule. But timestamp, same kind of deal there. We're not going to use it for this, but again, if you want it, just schedules do change throughout the baseball season sometimes, so that's there for that. The field names for this one: game date, game ID, home team ID, so on and so forth, and the venue. So again, these two are going to be really important to actually link that up with the box score data. And then of course down here we're doing the exact same thing with our CSV, writing it up so that it can actually be built into as a CSV, so we can take it into Snowflake a bit later. So now at this point we've got our roster, we've got our schedule. Now it's time to grab the box score, and that's when things start getting a lot more interesting, because if you thought that the roster and the schedule had a lot of data in it, the box score has even more. So let's dive into the box score now. Starting with grabbing our box score, so we're going to start off with the batting stats. So this process is a bit more involved than grabbing the roster and the schedule. So we're going to define our function as process batting stats. And then we're going to do a box. We're going to send in a box score, a schedule, game ID, and a team type. So the team type is going to be home or away. Excuse me, the schedule game ID. So we're going to loop through that schedule later on to get each game by game, because you can't grab them all at once. Excuse me. So that's how that's going to work. So we're going to start off with defining a blank list here. So batting records is equal to a blank list. Then we're going to grab our data. So batters is equal to box score dot get. And we're going to do an F string of team type, batters, and then comma that, and then we're going to do one. So we're just going to strip off the first element, which is the headers there, to grab the rest of it. So that works out perfectly there. So that's good for batters. And then team info is going to be equal to box score. And then we're going to do team info and team type. Perfect there. Okay, so it's going to grab that for us. So this is when we're going to actually iterate through this and grab all the stats. So for a batter and batters, so this brings back a lot of information for us. So we're going to just grab the stuff that I think is important. Doesn't mean it's the only important information, but it's what Steven thinks is important. So batter, dictionary. So that's going to only grab the things that are actually batters data. So record. It's going to be, we're going to open up the dictionary. So game ID. It's going to be equal to schedule game ID. So perfect there. Because we got to have the game ID to link it back to other things in our data. So game date is going to be box score game ID dot split. So this is going to extract that date for us there. Perfect. There we go. And then we're going to do team ID. So this is going to help us link the data to team information if we wanted to grab more data than just the Nationals later on. So just grab their ID. Perfect. We'll do team name, which I'm assuming we can all agree is going to be basically the same thing. So we're going to do team info and then team name. Perfect there. Okay, so now we want to do player ID. Of course, we'll use that to link in more data there. That's a good ID. So we'll do batter dot get, and then do person ID, comma that. So that's perfect there. So player ID. So then we'll do player name, and then do batter dot get, and then just do name. Perfect there. So it's going to grab their name. We'll do position as well. Position. And do batter.get. And then grab their position. And again, we're making it so if there's not a position, it helps. We get a blank string there. So batting order. So this is going to tell us where they batted in order, which can be good for some data analysis. Some people bat better as leadoff. Some people bat better at the end of the lineup. That's good information for us to use later on. So batter.get, and we'll do batting order. Again, our blank string if we don't have that. So that's good there. So we'll do at bat. So now we're going to get into the actual kind of numbers here. So batter.get. And we're going to start being lazy and start doing some copy paste here. So at bat is that. So the rest of these are going to be batter.get with that specific with the specific data in there. So at bat, we'll do run is batter.get with an R in there instead of the at bat. We'll do hit. You could probably guess is the same thing, but with an H. And then we'll have doubles. And then instead of at bat, we're going to have doubles in there. And then we'll have triples as well. So this API gives a ton of great batting information. It's going to be the same way for pitching that you'll see in just a moment. So triples, good there. We have home runs, the most important stat in baseball nowadays. I think we're getting back to small ball, though. We'll get there, I think. So home runs there. RBI. Again, I know this is a bit repetitive. The pitching is also pretty repetitive, so we're going to do a little bit of copy and pasting there to stop that repetitiveness from boring us all to sleep too much. Gets our walks. We have strikeouts next. Perfect. And then we have left on base. Again, all of this just comes from that batter call that we had earlier. We can grab our average. VG. We'll grab our OPS. Honestly, I don't even know what OPS stands for. I know it's an important baseball stat, but boy, I don't know. If you know, leave it in the comments below for us, because I can definitely learn something out of this video. So on base percentage there, and then last but not least is the slugging percentage. So SLG. So perfect there. So that's all the stats we're going to grab here. So we're going to, once we grab all those, we'll do a batting records, dot append that record, not slash append, dot append that record, and then we will return batting records. I think it just needs to go, yeah, sorry, it needs to go back one more to go there. Yeah, perfect. Okay, we'll do the same thing for pitching. So we're going to do an at task. We're going to define process pitching stats. And again, it gives us so much information. We're just going to grab some that I think is important. Schedule game ID and team type. Perfect there. Very similar. We're going to do pitching records, open up a string. Instead of typing all this out, I am going to do a little bit of copy paste work here to grab that data. So again, very similar to what we did before. Instead of batters, we're calling it pitchers, grabbing that. We're getting all the same information from before, except we're adding inning pitches, hits given up, runs given up, earned runs given up, walks, strikeouts, home runs given up, ERA, pitches, and strikes. So similar information, but obviously for pitchers this time, which of course makes sense. And then now we have to make this thing actually iterate through the game. So let's talk about how we're going to do that. So we're going to do at task. We're going to define collect season box scores. So we know how we're going to format it. Now we just got to actually grab them. So we're going to do our schedule file. So that's going to be what we grabbed at the top. We're going to use that same file. And we're going to exclude the game ID equal to 744-798. So we're excluding that last game because we're gonna do that in part 2 and act like that's an actual live event that's happening. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel for part 2 so you can see how would you end this journey without seeing the game data for 744-798. All right, so jumping into this. So first off, we want to create a data frame that reads in that CSV. So pd.read CSV, and that's going to be the schedule file there. So perfect. So we're going to remove the specific game ID. So df.df game ID. And we're going to say if that is not equal to exclude game ID. Perfect. Close that up. Beautiful. All right, so we're going to create 2 blank lists for batting and pitching stats. So all batting and all pitching. Perfect there. Okay. So that works out perfectly. So now we need to collect for each game. So for index and row in df, and we're going to iterate through those rows. Whenever I learned Python, I think this might have been like the most powerful function, is for index rows and the iter rows there. It blew my mind whenever I learned Python back in the day. So that equals game ID is equal to row game ID, and game date is equal to row game date. I know, crazy stuff there. So now we're going to open up a try block. So we're going to try box score is equal to stats API. So we're calling that API again. We're going to do box score data, and then do game ID. So what that's going to do is we're iterating through all those game IDs, and we're going to try to get every single game's box score. Okay, that's our goal there. So once we do that, that's when we're going to use the things that we had before. So for team type in home, away, we're going to do all batting dot extend, and this is where we're going to do our process batting stats, and then we're going to do box score, comma game ID, comma team type. Perfect there. And then you can probably guess what we're about to do next. So all pitching dot extend, and then we're going to do basically the same thing. So process except pitching stats this time. Open that up, and we're going to do the same thing inside of that. So we're going to actually process the batting and pitching stats there, so we can use that, and then we can print out that we have processed that game, just so we can have something to look at as this thing is running. So processed game game ID. Perfect. Okay, so that works there. And then, of course, if you have a try block, you should probably have an except in there. So except exception as E. And then we're going to print. Could have been a bit more witty with my stuff here, but error processing game, and then put it on our game ID so we know what failed there. All right, so perfect. So that works there. So after we grab those things, we're going to want to convert them into data frames. So batting df is equal to pd.dataframe and all batting. So we're going to put we want to create a batting data frame. We want to create a pitching data frame. We're going to use these later, as you can probably imagine. Data frame, all pitching. Perfect there. Batting df and pitching df. So now we're going to save these as CSV files. So we will do the batting file name is equal to the Nationals season batting.csv. And then, again, you can probably guess what we're about to do next. So we'll do a pitching file name is equal to the same thing, except we're going to say National season pitching instead. So let's change that out. Perfect. So that looks good. So the last thing we need to do is save these as CSVs. So batting df.to CSV. And then we'll do batting file name, and we do not want an index. Perfect. And then the same thing. So pitching df.to CSV, we'll do pitching df, comma, index equals false. So perfect there. And then lastly, we want to return some things outside of this function. So we're going to return the batting file name. We're going to return the pitching file name. We're going to return the batting data frame, and we're going to return the pitching data frame, so we can use those. All right, so perfect. So now at this point, we've grabbed the roster, we've grabbed the schedule, and now we've grabbed the full season, with the exception of the last game, of their batting and pitching stats. So now that we have all this data as CSVs, now we're going to take them into Snowflake and save them as tables. All right, so now we want to take those CSVs and turn them into tables inside of Snowflake. So we're going to do an @task again. We're going to define a function of upload CSV to Snowflake. This one's going to get a lot of use once we call it later on. This one has a lot of arguments, so we're going to do the CSV path. So that's going to be where that CSV is stored inside our system. So we're going to have the table names. That's going to be what we want the table to be called inside of Snowflake. We're going to have our database. So Snowflake database, pretty self-explanatory. Same thing for schema and account. So that's our Snowflake account, our Snowflake username, our Snowflake password, our Snowflake warehouse, and our role equals. We're going to put none in there. Okay, perfect. So yeah, a lot of arguments here, but all really, really important stuff for Snowflake. So we're going to have our try block starting out here. So we're going to read in our data frame. So df is equal to pd.read CSV. And that's going to be, we're going to read our CSV path. So perfect there. So if that reads, we can print out a, successfully read CSV with, and we'll do our length of data frame rows, just so we know that something actually gets read in there. So now we want to connect the snowflakes. We're going to do a con is equal to connect. So we're going to use that snowflake function that we define, or that we imported earlier. So is equal to connect. Open up that parentheses. So let's start defining some things. So user is equal to user. I know we're going to do some groundbreaking stuff here. So password, you can probably guess it, is also equal to password. And we're going to go on through here. So account is equal to account. Warehouse is equal to warehouse. Let's see. We're going to do database is equal database. Schema is equal to schema. So you can see why we set all these arguments earlier, and then role is equal to role. That's perfect. So that's going to connect. That's going to create a connection for us. And then we want to use that connection to actually say some things to Snowflake. So we're going to use that and use a cursor here. And this is how we're going to actually, send some SQL requests. So cursor dot execute. Use a little F string. And Snowflake loves us to yell at it. So use database. And we're going to toss our database in there. And then we're going to do that. We're going to do that 2 more times with our schema and warehouse. So I'm going to be a little lazy. So schema, toss in schema in there. Warehouse. And toss in warehouse. So that works there. So perfect. So now after we do that, we can print that we've actually connected to Snowflake successfully. So that's perfect there. So again, you're welcome to leave out all those print statements. They always make me happy whenever I'm running something because it tells me things are running successfully. It makes me happy. So now we want to write this in there. So we're going to do success and number of trunks, comma, is equal to write pandas. So remember we imported this earlier as well. So write pandas. We're going to use that connection that we had earlier that we just used. So con equals con. df is equal to df. Nope, we don't want annotations. df is just equal to df. We'll do table name is equal to table names. This is how we're writing this to our table inside of Snowflake. And then we want to use auto. Try to be lazy. That's what I get. Auto create table is equal to true. We want it to actually create a table for us. All right, perfect. So now we can do one more print statement to make us happy. Use an F string successfully. Uploaded success rows in chunks. Give us a nice message to let us know what actually got printed out and what not there. So we'll return success and we'll return in chunks. And of course, if we have a try block, we definitely need an except block. So we're going to do an except, exception as E, and we'll just print our F string. That error is, we'll wrap that in a string. So just print our error out there. And then we have our finally block, because if we open a connection, we definitely need to close that connection. So if con and locals, do our con.close, and then print out that the Snowflake connection is closed. So perfect there. So now that's all we need to get our Snowflake going. So now at this point, we've defined all the scripts that we need here. Now it's time to actually put this all together and run this thing as a flow. So bounce back out. We're going to do an @flow, and we're gonna print our log. So log prints equals true. So this is a good, if you're new to Prefect and you want to print stuff out inside of Prefect, make sure you do your log prints equals true inside your flow. Because then you might have to ask someone that works at Prefect, be like, hey, like, I'm not sure why things are not printing. And they're like, so, well, Steven, you should do your log prints equals true. I'm not saying that happened a couple weeks ago, but it might have. So now we're going to do our define. I just call this run stuff. You could be more, you could be more wordy there if you wanted to, but we're running stuff. That's what our definition does. So we're going to define run stuff. So first off, we're going to get our roster. So file name, comma, raw data is equal to export roster to CSV. So we're calling that. That's perfect. And then we can do our print f string. The CSV file has been created, and we'll do our file name there. So that's perfect. So it's going to print that out, and then we want to actually see what's going on there. So we'll do a new line and do the raw data dictionary. Do raw data. Actually, take a look at the data there, which is always good. So we're going to do the exact same thing. So file name. If you remember how similar it was to the roster and the schedule, so we're going to do the same thing and do export schedule to CSV. Perfect there. We're going to do the exact same print statement for the first line. Second line, we actually want to see how many rows that table actually has in it. So we're going to do a print f string, and we're going to do total games in schedule, and then we can just do the length of our raw data. That's going to tell us how many games we picked up, right? So should be around 162 because that's how many are in a baseball season. So perfect there. So now we're going to grab our batting and pitching stats. So batting file, comma, pitching file, comma, batting data frame, and pitching data frame is equal to collect season box scores, and we want to send in the Nationals schedule.csv, which is going to get picked up here. So we're going to use that there. And then we can print out our batting stats just to make sure we're getting what we need to get there. Batting file. And then we'll do the same thing, but with pitching to make sure that we're getting both files that we need there. So batting stats, pitching stats. There we go. So pitching file, perfect. That works there. We'll go down now. So now we're going to do our config block to actually do some things in Snowflake. So config, we're going to open up a dictionary here. So our CSV path. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through one by one. We're going to take our roster, we're going to take our schedule, and then take our batting and pitching stats into Snowflake from the CSV into a table. So that we're going to set 4 separate config blocks to do that 4 separate times. So it's going to get a bit monotonous here, so we'll do a little bit of copy and pasting to clean up to make this go a little bit quicker, but we will write this first one out. So Nationals roster.csv. So now we need our table names. This is what we want the table to be called inside of Snowflake. So table name, we will call it roster, being very creative here. So roster. The database. So again, this is the database that I've set up on our side. Of course, you probably won't have an MLB project database unless you create it and you want to match, which would be great. So then we have our schema. And again, this will be the schema that you're using inside of your Snowflake instance. And that's season data. Man, I cannot type right now. Season data, perfect. Okay, so that's schema for our account. I'm gonna call this secret for right now because we're gonna use a secret that we stored inside of Prefect to do that. I'll talk about that in just a moment. So our user, so that's my username, which is S Johnson. Password, and again, I'm gonna put a secret in there because we're gonna use a secret. And then let's see, we want to do warehouse. And then our warehouse that we use is compute warehouse. So again, that's going to be your specific warehouse when you're in on Snowflake. So we don't want to actually publicly store our Snowflake account information and our password, obviously. So we want to store those as secrets. Inside of Prefect, we call those blocks. So you can see up here at the very beginning in line 8, I mentioned that earlier that we're going to come back and use that at some point to actually grab some secrets. That time is now. So let's talk about how we're going to do that. So we're going to do secret block Snowflake password is equal to secret.load, and we're going to load our Snowflake password. Okay, so I've already created this before this video. So this video is not going to go too in depth on blocks. We'll have a video out on blocks very, very soon to let you know how you would do this if you want to do this on your end. But just know that I have a block set up, the Snowflake password inside of Prefect Cloud. So that works there. I'm going to do the same thing. Except instead of password, we're going to do account, and we do secret dot. Oh, I just realized I misspelled the word load. That would have been tough. I would have figured that out soon. This is Snowflake account. That works there. And then once you have these, you actually have to grab them. So Snowflake password is equal to secret block sf password dot get, and then the same thing for Snowflake account. We're going to do secret block Snowflake account dot get. So now that's going to grab that information from the blocks and actually pull them in so we can actually use them as variables. So scroll back down here. So for our account, we did Snowflake account. For our password, we did a Snowflake password. So we're going to do that. So at this point, after we get our config, we actually need to send that information off to Snowflake. Got ahead of myself there. So we're going to write success rows, comma, nunchucks. Makes me think about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when I say nunchucks like that. And then upload CSV, and then we're going to send the config over. Okay, so that works. That works for that. We're going to do that 3 more times. Again, I'm going to copy and paste a little bit here just so we don't have to actually write that out 3 more times. That would be painful. Boom. So you can see, again, we did schedule, everything else is the same. Season batting, season stats, everything else is the same. Pitching, season stats, same thing there. I finished it up with sending those things off. So that's all that we have to do. So we've grabbed all of our stuff, sent it all to Snowflake. Now we just need to run this thing. So to run this, we're going to back out and do if name is main. We will run stuff dot serve, and we are going to name this thing historical data grab. Okay, we've named this thing, we've served it. Now we just need to run this script. So run it there. A bunch of stuff's going to pop up. It's going to say now we can run our flow via the Prefect UI. So now we can actually go inside of Prefect, run this thing, and actually see this thing as it actually runs. So I'll see you inside of Prefect. So if we go to the URL that pops up when we run our script, it takes us to the deployment page inside of Prefect. And this is where we're going to be able to run our deployment. We can add schedules, add triggers, so on and so forth. Then, of course, look at the logs. So we're going to go ahead and click the run button, and we're just going to do a quick run. So that's just going to kick off just a regular run of our script. So you can see we have it scheduled here. If I click on the name of that run, it's going to take me to the log page. And so basically this thing is going to schedule. It might pin for a second and then start running. So what you can see here is that it's opening the process, completed the submission of the flow run, downloaded the flow code. So just kind of running through this a little bit. Now you can see that it's actually running. And so we're starting to get those logs that we printed out. So the CSV file has been created. So the roster file has been created. There is a raw data dictionary if we want to look at it. So you can kind of see all the data that comes in for the roster information. So we got player ID, full name. There's a link, jersey number, position, so on and so forth there. So, and even the position's interesting because You have like the code that you would use if you're actually doing the scorebook, so on and so forth there. So pretty interesting data that you can grab out of this. And like I mentioned earlier when we were writing this code, there is a lot of stuff in there. Like there's a lot of data that you can actually pull out of this thing, which I think is really, really cool. And so what you can see is happening right now is the schedule CSV has now been created. And then you can see that there's 164 games in the schedule. So that unfortunately picked up a couple extra games. So that could have been potentially the All-Star game. That could have been potentially the maybe a preseason game like that happened kind of the day or two before the season started that I didn't catch. But that's just something to note as we go in to clean the data up. So then you can see as we continue down the page here, so you can see the batting stats have been created, the pitching stats have been created. You can see there's 3,317 batting records, 1,407 pitching records. So it makes sense there's more batting records than pitching records because, one pitcher is going to pitch multiple innings versus a batter, there's multiple batters per inning. So there should be more than that. Then you can see down here at the bottom that the flow is completed. It finished in state completed. It exited cleanly. And then up here on the top, you can see that we actually have a completed state, which is really great. And so now what we can do is we can actually go into Snowflake and look at that data. So if I go into Snowflake, you can see, if you remember we did MLB project, we did season data. If I open up the tables, you can see there's our data there. So roster, schedule, batting season stats, pitching season stats. And I can actually do a run here real quick. Look at this data so you can see game date, game ID, home team ID, away team ID, and then the venue there, which is the data that we specified earlier. So this data actually, this data came through Prefect with our Python scripts and actually got into Snowflake. Now we're going to dive into DBT and do a little bit of cleanup here to finish up part 1. All right, so we're going to dive into DBT now. So I've already kind of set up our DBT cloud instance here. So we have our models folder with a baseball folder inside of it to build our models out. So we're going to start off with some raw models, and then we're going to build into some intermediate models, and that's going to end our part 1. Part 2, we're actually going to build out and get to the marts, which will be exciting. So we're going to create a file. We'll start off with raw roster.sql. And again, that's just going to pull that raw roster table in here. So you can see it's going to look exactly like this, except we are going to change schedule for roster. So I can actually preview that. And that should give us some roster. There it is. Perfect. So we're going to save that. So that's good for our raw roster. We're going to do a raw schedule, which will look exactly the same, but with schedule in there. So we'll save that. Continue on here. So we'll do our raw season batting stats.sql. And again, going to look very, very similar, except we're going to put batting season stats in there. So we can preview that just to make sure some data is coming in. Perfect, it is. Save, and then you can probably guess what the next one's going to be. We're going to do a raw season pitching stats. Season pitching stats.sql. Paste that in there, change batting to pitching. Go ahead and hit save on that. So now we have all of our raw models built into DBT now. So that means that we can build out our intermediate models now. That one didn't go into baseball for some reason. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So now we can actually go into and build some intermediate things out if we would like. So we're going to do that. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in, let's see. So for our raw schedule, so if I go look at that inside of Snowflake, we can scroll through. Everything looks pretty normal going down the page here. But what we want to do is to make sure that if we have stats for the game, so that what we want to do is we want to future-proof this thing. So let's say that you're starting this process out at the first game of the season or the second game of the season. We want to make sure that we have a field inside of this table that's going to show if we actually have the game stats. So let's see. So what we're going to do, so this is going to get a bit more complicated on this one. So we're going to create a file. We'll do intermediate schedule.sql. So we're just going to look at the pitching stats for this. So we're going to say with pitching games as select distinct game ID from, and then we want to refer to our pitching stats here. So let's copy as ref, paste that in there. Perfect. So we're going to grab the game IDs from the pitching stats that we've already gotten. And then we're going to add a column that's going to tell us this information as. So we're going to select, and then we will reference with S here. So game date, we'll do S dot game ID. So again, we're just grabbing all these fields ID here. S dot home team, S dot home team ID. Of course, we're going to have S dot away team. We'll do the same thing, but with add in the ID there. So away team ID. We'll do S dot venue to know where the game was played. And then we'll do a case statement. So when we're going to reference pitching games as P. So when pitching games dot game ID is not null. So whenever we have the information, it's going to be a 1. And then else 0. So basically, if we have the stats for it, it's going to come in as a 1. If we don't, it's going to come in as a 0. And we're going to end our case statement as have stats. It's kind of a Boolean value there. We'll say from raw schedule. So we'll copy that as a ref, put that in there. And again, we reference that as S. So that's perfect there. And then we want to do a left join pitching games. We called that P on S. So the game IDs for both is equal to P dot game ID. Perfect there. So that works out for us. Close that parentheses, and then we want to select star from add column. And if we preview this, it's probably going to tell us it hasn't been built yet. Oh, no, it's good. Okay. So we have stats for all these games. That's not surprising, except for the last one, like I mentioned before, earlier in this video. We're getting all of them but the last game, so that looks perfect there. We got exactly what we want, so we can go ahead and save that as intermediate schedule. So that's perfect there. So now we need to do an intermediate roster. Actually, we're not going to change the roster at all. So we're going to keep the raw roster as just that. We could just do a select all from raw roster, but not much reason to do that. So now we're going to work with our batting stats. So we're going to do int season batting stats, int season batting stats .SQL. So perfect there. So that works. Okay, so we're basically just going to grab all of that, all the batting stats in there. So let's look and see what that looks like real quick. So batting season stats, perfect. Go ahead and run that. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of some columns here. Like we don't need the game date. We don't need the game date. So we don't need some of this information because it's actually going to, come through in other ways. And we also want to get rid of all the players that are not on the Nationals. So we're going to have to add a where clause here. So we're going to do a select. We're going to select game ID. Select team ID. We're going to select team name. Actually, thinking about it, if we connect it to the roster, we will not need the team ID or the team name. So we're going to get rid of those. We need the player ID, so that's what's going to connect back to the roster. We need, and then now we're just going to grab the stats. So at bats, runs, hits, doubles, triples, home runs, RBI, walks, strikeouts, left on base, average, OPS, which again is an important stat. If you know what it is, let me know in the comments below. It's the only baseball stat I don't think I know. Little on base percentage there, and then we'll do slugging. That's going to be from I need to capitalize some stuff. Snowflake likes to yell, so let's yell at it. So we're going to do it from the raw season batting stats. Copy as ref, put that in there. We're going to throw a where clause in there. So where we're going to say team ID is equal to 120 because that is the Nationals team ID. So we'll preview that. Perfect. So we can see the stats came in there. We have our player ID that we can connect back to the roster to get the actual player. No reason to have the information twice. So we'll save that, and we're going to do the exact same thing, except we're going to do it for pitching. So int pitching stats.sql. So perfect there. All right, so this time we're going to change a little bit of things to make it work. As so it counts wins and counts losses, because what's interesting about this pitching table is it includes that in the notes section, which is interesting. So if we look at this data, you can see a note. It has the win, and then it's they're 1-0, 0-1, so on and so forth as they continue down. We just want to see whether they won, they lost, or they had a save, because then we can sum those things up later on. So we're gonna do a select statement. We're going to select the game ID. We're going to select the player ID to know what player it is. Then we can connect back and get the team ID, team name, player name, and all that good stuff there. We're going to do a case statement. So when the note section or the note column is like, so we're going to use a little bit of regex here. When it's like this W, comma, anything, perfect there. So basically we're saying, because they all have that sort of parentheses, W, comma. So when we have that sort of nomenclature, we're going to say then 1, else 0, and that's going to be end as is when. Okay, so we're going to do that exact same thing 2 more times, except for losses and saves. So we'll copy, forgot to copy the C. There we go. So we'll toss an L in there, and then we'll toss an S in there. And this will be is loss. This will be is save. So those are important pitching stats there. So we have our loss and we have our save. So now we're just going to go through the rest of our pitching statistics. So we have innings pitched. We have hits given up. We have runs given up. We have the earned runs giving up. We have walks, strikeouts, home runs, ERA, and then we have total pitches, and then we have strikes. So now we can say that is going to be from our raw season pitching stats. So we can paste that in there. And then we can say again where team ID is equal to 120 to only grab the Nationals player. So now if I run this, we should get some data here. Let's see. What did I do wrong here? Team ID. I didn't put it in quotation marks. There we go. Yeah, Snowflake needs those quotation marks around the fields. Perfect. You can see it's actually aggregating those as we want it to. So we have some wins, we have some saves, innings pitches, earned runs, so on and so forth there. So we can go ahead and give this a save. So this is going to conclude part 1 of our Moneyball Marvin series. So I'm glad that you joined us. Part 2 is going to include, we're basically going to act like we're on game day. We're going to wait until that last game of the season finishes. We're going to fire an event into Prefect to grab that last game, bring that data into the data that we just put together here. And then we're actually going to build out a small little dashboard just to show our data off inside of Hex. So super exciting part 2 that's going to be coming really soon. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you know whenever that gets posted. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you next time.